R Fletcher. Now sit back and prepare to be entertained.
Welcome to the Dripping Bucket Podcast with your hosts, Krystle Matar and Michael R Fletcher. That's me. Today we are joined by J E Hannaford, author of the Black Hind's Wake series, which is, yes, the skin and the pact. And also, I'm cheating here looking, Aurelian Gates, which, holy shit, there's book 1. Do you have book 2 there yet?
Yeah, Jenny, you have book 2 there.
And book 2, there we go. And
the full show
so
off
Jenny
tour.
has joined us today to talk about both things and stuff. And so that's what we're going to do.
That's our style, things and stuff.
Yeah,
we have some ideas for topics.
Both of them.
Whether or not we hit the topics or not. So we usually do like to start with just either as brief or as long as you want, kind of a story about how you got here, like not only as a writer, but I think also as a reader and like a absorber of the fantasy genre, sometimes as gaming as well. And so I'm always curious to know like how long your roots are in the genre, as well as kind of what caught your eyes the first time. So
well, my roots are so deep in the genre that they probably are on fire in the magma. I've read ever since I can remember. I'm definitely one. I read Alice in Wonderland in a car on the way to my grandparents at 8. As a significant book, I remember reading that. I'd read Lord of the Rings by 10 years old, so I was one of those.
The early indoctrination.
My father is to blame. And he liked all sorts of books and all sorts of fantasy. My mum always liked more literary books and a moderate amount of women's fiction, and lots of, more recently, she's into running books and sports and that side of things. But yeah, I mean, I read anything I could get my hands on. I went through a James Herbert phase, so that kind of darkness of that. I went through a horse phase, so I read every horse book I could get my hands on. Horse girl phase, yeah. I am a rider, or I haven't done much recently, but yeah, so horse things in books really annoy me when they're wrong.
Me too.
To read a book with a horse in, I am gonna come back with critiques. Unless you are a rider yourself. But yeah, so, and then I kind of meandered my way back through Truckers, Diggers and Wings, through Terry Pratchett's early sets, and through other stuff, and whatever I could get my hands on in the library and at home, basically. My dad's books always looked more interesting, so I wanted to read them. So Marillion, he's got a beautiful edition with the like stained glass window style cover on the front, the dark blue hardback.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know what edition it is. One of these days I'll remember to check. And yeah, I remember seeing that, and that was like a goal, was to read and to finish that. And I had a go at it, and then I stopped, and I went back and I read it again. But and I finished it that time. But then as I went through school and I was doing my A-levels and doing everything else, when I needed to escape, it was always into a book.
Yeah.
And one of the big first series that I read, like a big chunky series, was probably picked up. That was a gold mannequin falling over. Was that one picked up on my way to Canada, and then I've got 2 others I picked up in the airport on my way back from Canada, and I finished that. That was the first like big 6-book series or anything that I bought rather than just got from the library.
Right.
At some point I started Robin Hobb and then forgot I'd ever read it until after I wrote Gates, and then panicked because Star. And then obviously Robert Jordan, Wheel of Time. But basically, if I couldn't find a book that was chunky enough that I thought I was going to be lost in it for weeks and months at a time, I wouldn't pick it up. They needed to be absolute beasts because I didn't want something that was too small. Interestingly, as I've got older and I'm a parent and you have the pressures of the day job, because I have the Kindle, what I tend to do now is I just pick what I fancy. And if it's long or short, it's far less important because I can't see the spine width.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But if I go into a shop, I still have a minimum spine width. If it's narrower than my thumb, I pretty much won't take it off the shelf.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
I literally won't even pick it up to look at it.
Yeah, I used to be the same way until like just the last few months, where I find I'm like really fascinated by novellas specifically, because it's like, how do they do that? How do they get so much out of so little? And it's just such a skill that I'm like, I gotta read them all and like absorb their powers. I don't know. But yeah, otherwise I'm very much a reader, so I can definitely relate.
Yeah, I mean, I've got far more narrower books now because I've bought physical copies of books that I've read on the Kindle. I've wanted to have a copy of on my shelf,
and
things like that.
They scammed you into reading a short book.
Yeah, I know. How dare they? But it was good, so I bought one. Especially if they're indie, I'll often buy one. I tend to avoid the sales. If their book is in KU, I would rather read the KU and give them more money than buy the 99p on the sales. Yeah. So that just tends to be, if I know I'm definitely going to read it anyway, I tend to do it that way. So if I haven't bought your book in the last sales recently, it doesn't mean I don't love you. It means I probably want to give you more money. So.
And that's where the chonk reader really, really has value, because you can get a lot of pages off of a couple of books in some of these epics.
Yes. But yeah, so I've read Robert Jordan. I read The Wheel of Time, right the way through to the end. Took me 6 months to read the last book because I do have a bit of a problem in that if I don't want a series to finish, sometimes I won't finish the book.
Yep. Yeah.
So it took me 6 months to finish that. And there is a book on my shelf up there behind me, hiding behind one of mine, so you can't see which one it is, that I have not read the second half of the last book because I'm not willing for that series to finish.
Yeah, you're not ready.
And that is a current author, and I'm not confessing which one it is. So yes. So that's So there's those, and then I guess I just moved on from there. I had a friend. When I was teaching, I found I had less time to read, but I was living on my own. It was me and my dog, and I'd have time to think as I was walking around. And I made friends with the warden on a wildlife reserve. And this friend played. So, I learned about what was on the reserve, but then I'd go and chill. And they played EverQuest. So they played online games. So I went from reading about the world to being able to be part of the world and feeling like I was playing my own part in the stories, which was very cool.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh God, I get to be the druid, which is, but that does mean I'm totally done on elves and druids and dwarfs and everything like that. And again, I'm really, really sorry, but if they're the main folk in your book, I'm probably not going to get very far. Because I overkilled years of playing online games, and I'm like, but so if I finish it and you've got all those in it, you've done a really good job because you've pulled me past my dislike of something extra.
Unique, a different
yeah,
spin,
I like different. I really like different. So yeah, and then I wrote a little bit of fan fiction for that, which exists somewhere on the internet. Do not go looking it up.
Is that would you say that's where you started the writing? Because that was going to be my follow-up.
I think. I mean, I wrote in primary school, and I wrote really long stuff in primary school, and then I went down the science route and the languages route. And because I went down science and languages route, the kind of writing bit went to the side. I was so fascinated by how everything worked and all the marine biology stuff that the writing definitely shelved for a long time.
Was there a book that sort of pushed you over the edge, from reader to novelist?
Yeah.
That sort of made you go, yeah, I can do this. I want to write and finish like a novel of my own world.
There was a series that I remember finishing, and I remember thinking, this battle has gone on for 7 books. I can do better than this.
Yes. Fellow spite writer. I love it. Oh, some of the best. I was just saying on a different
I mean, and don't get me
stream
wrong,
that, like,
it was a good book series,
yeah,
but I also
yeah,
came to the end of it and I was like, I don't need 7 books for battle. Where are the characters?
yeah,
Where's their
yeah,
interaction? What's happening beyond the fight that they're going to and the next fight that they're going to? And I feel like I need more of them,
yeah,
which is why I suppose my books are very much not set in the big battle. They're on the periphery. There's maybe 1 or 2. The fights tend to be much more intimate. They tend to be the face-to-face
yeah.
rather than the battle. So,
Yeah, I really like that about the skins specifically, where there's certainly no lack of tension and no lack of, the stakes are still high and it's still violent and it's still really tense, but the focus just sits so beautifully on the characters and also the mythology that you're working with, that it really stands very unique in the genre. In indie, which is a genre of unique stories, so bravo. I really enjoyed this skin. So yeah, the focus, you've got me 100%.
Actually, that I'm mentioning the uniqueness of indie, which actually kind of segues nicely into something we were talking about before we started recording, which is subverting, expectations, tropes, and whatnot.
Yeah,
I love that about indie.
What that was just we just glided right into the new topic.
we did it.
So good.
We remembered our own topic for the first time.
Yeah, that's never happened before and will never happen again. So you mentioned like not liking, or now sort of not being into elves, dwarves, and sort of all these sort of the classic.
No, they have to be really good to pull me in. I mean, David Green has elves in his series, but the way that they work is not Dragonlance-y. It's not. They're very much their own individuals with their own, and that works for me. So that's fine. I love his books. But yeah, when you've got, even if you take something that you expect and then you twist it, I very much like that. I think it has backfired on a couple of occasions that people have read the introductory chapters of The Skin on Amazon and gone, oh, did I disappear?
Yeah, but we hear you, so it should be fine.
Oh, okay. I think it backfired a couple of times with the kind of twisting, because it shouldn't be mucking around. You still got me again now? I can go on to the...
Yeah, we still have you.
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah.
It's fully charged, I promise.
Internet shenanigans. No, I it says you're still recording, so it's probably fine. You can just,
it says recording on my end.
Yeah.
So, I completely lost my thread. Yeah. So you start with The Skin thinking you're reading a normal Selkie mythology.
Yeah.
And here's the Selkie and her skin's been taken and boom, boom, boom. And actually, then by the end of chapter 1, no. Already, it's not the Selkie whose skin, it's the sister that steps in and sacrifices herself. And you follow that individual, not the one whose skin has been stolen. And immediately, and on top of that, you're not in the past. You're in the future, and it's dystopian kind of timeline. And nothing's where you think it's going to be from where you start.
Yeah. I really enjoyed
think
that.
with indie fantasy, I like the way that a lot of people are going completely outside the expectations. You only have to look at can we say thyroid horses? And
thyroid swords and
yeah, I mean that never make it through
horses.
Cyborg horses. I mean there's that, and then you've got some of the other stuff that's come through, some of the SPFBO things, and I think even if you look at the basics in indie, we can still produce a chonker. If you want to write a massive book, you can write a massive book.
Yeah, and there's still a market. Yeah, absolutely.
And there's still a massive market for it. And yeah, I mean, there's just so many wonderful subversions. I mean, which would you say was your favourite of the ones you've come across recently?
Oh, that's always a trick question. I always go like,
I know, I threw one back at you. You wouldn't expect me to do that.
Yeah, cheating. The first thing that came to my mind was actually Krystle's Legacy of the Brightwash, which sort of set up this, like romantic storyline,
Yes.
very sort of, gas lamp kind of thing. And then just went sideways into dark as fuck territory. I was like, what the hell? And sort of wasn't a romance fantasy, there's still very strong, romance, aspects to it, but like that's not kind of all it's about. It's more about, what the characters are going through and, dealing with themselves. Their actual relationships with the other characters are pretty much a clusterfuck of, failure.
I could agree with you there.
Yeah, a clusterfuck of failure. That is exactly. Yeah. I hate how
but
true
with
that
good cherry
is.
pie.
Yeah, very good cherry pie. I'm just looking over my shoulder at my indie shelf, and I'm gonna say the one that stands out to me the most is his Ragged Company by R.D. Denton, where it's a similar thing where the setup makes you expect, a pretty straightforward Western. It takes place in Texas, and so on the surface, as you read, you're like, yeah, this is a Western novel. And what he's done is he's broken the story up into it's very episodic in that he does the thing and then that's solved, so he moves on to the other thing and then that's solved. But somewhere along the way, something was building that you weren't noticing until he also starts noticing. That these things that he thought were solved have been actually connected to a big bad thing. And that's where the magic starts dropping into the story as well, whereas these sand zombies and stuff, just really unsettling,
that book is on my list.
Feeling.
I have it.
Yeah.
I have it on my Kindle loaded.
It was really good, and I remember it just listening through, oh yeah, a Western. I like this genre. That's fine. I thought it was going to be fantasy, but it's a Western. That's fine. And then there's this moment where you're like, oh, I see. It is also a Western. It's also a little bit horror, just the unsettling feeling of all the things coming together. And yeah, that one absolutely, even from the I guess I should have known, just from the cover, that fantasy elements would come in eventually. But his writing is so smooth that you don't notice him manipulating you. And that was a really good example.
That's clever.
He subverted what I expected between the cover and the first couple chapters, and then he subverted back to where I expected, and I had forgotten that I expected it. So yeah, it was a really good book. I'll keep screaming about it for years.
And I love it when you come across a book that you scream about for years.
Yeah.
That's special. I've been screaming
when I read
a
it.
lot.
It was so long ago.
I've been screaming a lot about. I guess I think it's probably a novella, which is Fish by Ida Keogh, which is It is small press rather than completely totally indie in that respect. But I mean, small presses will often take a chance, it seems, on things that again wouldn't come through the trad route. And it's like one scenario, but from loads of different perspectives. So it's very untraditional style. There's a couple of perspectives that come in more than once, but it's one of those that you read it and then it literally lives in your head afterwards, and you're doing something and you have a moment, you think about a scene from it, and you just think that's just the talent of somebody who's just writes so well that they think about the scene from things like that. And just I mean, if I look at mine, I mean, one of the things I think I was so much fun writing Skybreaker as an anthology where we tried to do everything differently, because it wasn't a collection. It was a co-authored, a six co-authored work where we were sitting there sending each other messages going, I've thrown a boot through a portal. If anyone wants a boot, I need a whale. Can someone send me a whale? I need some snow. There's some snow coming from there. Somebody's drunk in that one. And you're chucking stuff at each other through your portals,
that's
through
really
time,
cool.
space, and time as you're writing this thing. So we were all having to kind of write at the same time in order to accommodate each other's stories as they happened.
That's really cool.
Which
Yeah, it's a
was
really cool idea.
it was so much fun to do. I mean, every now and then somebody says, should we do another one? And
You're like, yes, but
it was, I mean, it didn't take me long to do mine once I had what I needed through other people's portals. I mean, Lee Conley very kindly sent me the whale, and I think I threw something at someone else and someone else gave me a boot. Or did I give someone a boot? I can't remember. I definitely put a pile of snow. I was responsible for the pile of snow that landed in somebody's one. It was on top of a mountain somewhere. But yeah, it was, again, even within anthologies, I like doing stuff that's different.
yeah.
I mean,
Do you have sort of a favorite aspect to sort of twist into something new? Like, is it the characters, the world, the magic? Is there like one part that you're sort of more drawn to that interests you more to sort of pull apart? And
I think overall I quite like pulling things like folklore in. I mean, it's weird because, I mean, I was thinking about this when we were talking about questions earlier. Because in the journey to find my own voice as an author, I think The Pact is the truest book to that. Even though it's not the most recent, because Gates of Hope was written before I wrote The Skin and the Pact.
Yeah.
Gates of Sorrow was part written before then. So The Pact is kind of where I want to be in levels of darkness, in levels of everything, and the way things fit, the pacing and all the rest. But when I reviewed the Gates series, I was like, no, this is the right place for this series. So I'm just going to have to sit this out and keep this at this pitch and this voice and this tone. But where I want to be, I like taking things people think they know where it's going and maybe it doesn't quite. I mean, the dogs in Gates of Hope, quite often my twist isn't necessarily caused by wanting to deliberately subvert a trope, but because the normal trope really has some way in which it annoys me. So I make it more biologically fit. So the dogs don't talk. They're telepathic, but they don't talk.
Right.
Because dogs can't talk. They can't make words.
You're gonna get
so how can a dog possibly talk?
Up in arms with statements like that.
I'm hoping I'm still with you both. Right. So my dogs communicate in pictures.
Oh, interesting.
So you get a telepathic image of the dog picturing it's doing what it wants to do. So Star spends an inordinate amount of time sending messages to Darren that involve Star eating food.
That makes sense. Having a dog, I can confirm that if he could.
We've just done this massive fight. We've come back in. We're trying to decompress. We're trying to work out what we're doing because we've just fought a giant Aldrin and a Zotrol outside the gates. And Star's going,
hey guys, I'm hungry.
So you just have images. So the characters have to learn to deal with that, and the sense that he has to learn to be able to function as a human whilst every now and then having his vision completely superimposed by an image of the dog eating food or the dog, what the dog can see.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So it's things like that that I kind of like sit there and go like, okay, and like how the magic's inherited is genetic. It's a genetic mutation with magic behaving like radiation. That's in the backstory, but it means that mathematically the number of individuals in each village who have it is right. Because I'm that sad that I worked out the genetic calculations and codes for how many people in a regular population and in an intent should have the genes, because I know which chromosome it's on. That's sad. So a lot of the background stuff. So it's kind of like, no, you're not going to have a random person who's got no family history having this.
Yeah.
There will be family history, which means that his family will track back in a couple of generations to somewhere else.
Yeah.
He might be the only one that's shown it because it's recessive, but there will be a backtrack. The family will have origins from the place that it all came from, potentially, if you go back far enough. So there's I like things like that. Give me I want a giant flying beast. Okay. I could have a dragon.
How do we actually make that work? Yeah.
Or I could have a pterodactyl. So, and I do. Zotrals are pterodactyls. The guy on the spine of Gates of Hope, that's a pterodactyl in the background.
Oh, cool.
So when you look at him, there's a shadow. There is a shadow on the back there, that just across the middle.
Oh, yeah.
See those pointed wings?
Yeah, you see the little...
That's not a dragon. So the Zotral, there are dragons. I've given you dragons too, because people want dragons. But my dragons aren't normal either.
Dragons. Of course not.
They're not normal. They are. If you're watching this and you haven't read it and you don't want a spoiler, put your fingers in your ears for a second. They are incarnates of emotion generated by people on the planets.
You
can take your fingers back out your ears.
Oh, okay.
So,
all right. I was gonna say,
but yeah. So that means that there's other things. I mean, I said, yeah. So it affects characterization and stuff then massively, because if you are like that, you cannot display everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was just gonna say, we're into some parallel thinking a little bit with our dragon inspiration, so maybe I'll have to throw up a disclaimer that I'm not going to read your book until I'm done writing my book. So I can't be accused.
That's
I'll stick
fine.
with the skin. Yeah.
Alrighty, we're at I can't actually read that time. 26, 28?
Yeah,
I don't know, however many minutes.
Oh, we've gone over.
This is a lovely spot to wrap this one up. Join us again in some future episode when J E Hannaford returns to chat with us about the other stuff we didn't get to this time, which we will get to next time. Blah blah, all the usual shit you're supposed to say at about the end of a podcast about liking, subscribing, and all that crap.
Yeah. Follow Jenny, buy your books.
There's a Discord server you can hop on and chat with us about. We should actually, have we ever invited a single guest onto that Discord server?
A couple of people have made them their way in. Mihir's in.
So they found their own
Connor's in.
You keep forgetting to hand out the invitation.
It's mostly just for myself and Clayton.
Yeah.
Just shit talking.
Yep, it's true.
Yeah, it'd be cool to, hop on over there and shit talk with us. Anyway, we'll wrap it up there. Yeah. Thank you, Jenny, for joining us. That has been awesome.
My pleasure.
And we'll see you all next week.
Yeah.
Or tomorrow.